people are joining. I hope the audio is fine now. Yes, I got a confirmation, so thank you. And a very warm welcome to each one of you who have joined today in this session. It's a pandemic situation, and incidentally, I hope that all of you are safe, keeping well and healthy. It's also giving us an opportunity to explore new learning avenues, and we are seeing a lot of webinars, faculty development programs being organized. We have with us our very own student, Orijit Mukherjee. I'm so thankful, so happy, and extremely proud to have you as a speaker of this session from Department BP Poddar Institute of Management and Technology. I extend a very hearty welcome to all of you who have joined the session today, not only from our college as well as from other colleges. Due to enormous number of participants, we are hosting it on YouTube. So please leave your questions in the chat, which will be collected at the end of the session by Dr. Vikramaditya Mondal, and he'll be passing it on to the speaker who can answer the questions. So without much further ado, I'll pass it on to Professor B.N. Chatterjee, our former Dean and Professor Emeritus of Computer Science and Engineering Department, BPPIMT, to speak a few words on this occasion. Sir, please.
Yes, Professor Ananda Kanjilal, Head of the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, BP Poddar Institute of Management Technology. I am extremely glad that the Department of Computer Science and Engineering of this institute is arranging a webinar on deep learning in NLP for low resource languages, that too by one of our I should say very good alumni, Orijit Mukherjee. I am sure he will be introduced by one of the students of the institute very soon. So I welcome Orijit for presenting this webinar today. This is a very important area of learning as well as for research, that is NLP, natural language processing. And from time to time we find that various methodologies are being used for deep learning for this purpose. But remember, this topic is being nurtured by the community, I should say, academic community, for a very, very long time. As far as I understand, since 1950, the work is going on in natural language processing. It started with human nature of working with computer in natural mode of expression, that is by our written language as well as by spoken language. So initially the work was towards translation. Later on, people tried to use this for many type of application. I find that later on, when the application area increased, then the word learning got somehow introduced, because they tried to take the help of I should say pattern recognition and machine learning in order to help this process. And gradually they found that unsupervised or semi-supervised learning was the key area for NLP. And earlier work was through feature extraction, but later on, since 2010, I find the work of in deep learning. Deep learning has got very much introduced in NLP, and our ex-student, one of our prestigious alumni, is going to talk a little bit in this aspect, particularly when low resource language, when we use it for low resource language, where we don't have so much of features and other things, how deep learning is going to be utilized. Without much waiting, let us hear our speaker, because this is an area of current interest and it will remain for quite some time in our area. Thank you very much. So let us introduce our speaker and start the webinar.
Thank you so much, sir, for laying the background for the talk. I request Sharoni to kindly give a brief introduction and we can go over to the talk direct.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone present here. Right now, I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Arijit Mukherjee, on board. Arijit Mukherjee is a pass out of the class of 2016 CSC Department BPPIMT. His final year project under Professor Suprabhat Maiti was based on human-computer interaction with hand gestures. He went on to work at Cognizant in analytics and information management as a Node.js developer, building minimum viable products for clients using IBM Watson in image, NLP, and speech domains. After that, he pursued his MTech from IIT Bombay in 2017. He has worked under Professor Preeti Jyoti and Professor Pushpak Bhattacharya on automatic question generation, question answering, and cross-lingual learning for resource languages. Their work on cross-lingual question generation improved significantly over current methods in both Hindi and Chinese and was published in ACL 90. In 2019, he joined Microsoft IDC as an applied scientist and worked in the Search Technology Center, India. Currently, he works on building text-to-speech models for Indian locals for Microsoft Cognitive Services and other customers. His interest lies in enabling current deep learning methods for speech and NLP on low-resource languages, making state-of-the-art models run production environments in real time, few-shot learning, cross-lingual learning, model compression, and distribution. Arijit Mukherjee, thank you for joining us today for this webinar.
Thanks for the long introduction. So I will start now. So basically,
Arijit,
yeah.
Actually, Principal Ma'am has joined with our webinar. And may I ask Madam, please say about something about this webinar?
Yeah.
Respected Professor B.N. Chatterjee, today's speaker, and also our alumni member, Arijit Mukherjee, and all other members of BPPIMT family. Good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to this session on deep learning for NLP and speech for low resource languages. I'd like to express my sincere thanks to Arijit Mukherjee, who is presently working as data and applied scientist in Microsoft, as already mentioned by Sharoni. Thanks to the coordinators for organizing this session, which surely will provide the flavor of industry and also will enlighten us about the recent trends in this domain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Arijit, over to you, please.
Yes. Thank you for the long introduction. Yeah, so I will start now. So before I start, I will let you guys know that there is a delay for around like 20-30 minutes in the till I say to the streaming. So like if you ask something in the chat, I won't be able to get it at that current moment. I think there is someone's mic on. So before I start, there is a bit of disclaimer about this. The presentation oversimplifies a lot of things and leaves out most of the nuances which are actually integral part of the learning solution. So everything I say, take it with a pinch of salt and go. There are a lot of links in the presentation, and if you want to know more about them and know more in the detail, you can just go to those links and look at them. So I will start it. So the content for today will be like, we all know about the image. We most probably know about the image net movement in computer vision, and what I'm going to present you is like the image net movement for NLP has come and it's like just starting. So the talk will be more focused about how the NLP field is actually revolutionizing in the last couple of years. And I will start with the basics of NLP and then go a little bit deeper about like language understanding and generation and like universal language understanding. And then the last part of the talk will be more focused around like how we scale deep learning solution across multiple languages and also like how we actually put those models into production. So we'll start basic things like what is the ImageNet movement? So if you go like previously people used to do like a lot of feature engineering and then do like in image only. People used to do a lot of feature engineering and then do simple classification. So in 2009, there was a dataset released which was called the ImageNet Large Scale Visual Recognition Challenge. And that actually invited a lot of research in this field. So what the dataset had, it had like around 1.2 million trained images and there was like 1,000. So, are you guys able to see the slides or not? Like,
Yes,
I think you
yes.
guys are able to.
Yes, we are getting a slide.
Okay, sure. So the ImageNet datasets consist of like 1.2 million object images, and there is around like 1,000 object classes, and the test set is built around like 100K images. And most probably we all know or somehow know about this challenge. So something happened over this challenge, and as you see over the like year 2012, something changed and there was a drastic jump. Why this drastic jump came? Because someone thought that deep neural networks, which were actually discarded around like 6-7 years back, that it won't be possible, it won't be feasible. Someone implemented that and presented that for the challenge, and they got like around 9% absolute jump in the accuracy. And that was like what we know as the ImageNet movement, and like everything changed after that. Deep learning AI became like a buzzword after that.
Orijit, just an interruption. I think, as you mentioned, there is a delay. So
Yes.
the slide which you are explaining, it is not yet there on the YouTube. Okay,
Oh.
so probably you can linger more and continue. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so basically this happened, the ImageNet classification. So just open
So it's available now. It's available. Yeah.
okay. So I will first start with the basic. So is my voice and the slide is not in sync?
Voice is coming, but the slide is coming with a delay. Okay, so
Okay.
maybe you can have an introduction slide by the time the slide comes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if you want to discuss about the basics in this so it's how ML works. So basically you have like a data this and you want to clarify like what will probability that someone is like a COVID positive or COVID negative. So how you do that is basically like the first step is like pre-processing. You pre-process that data, do some normalization on top of that, and do some encoding on the final levels. So suppose like here you encode 2 as 1 and false as 0. So finally what happens is like this is your input And then in the neural network scenario, what happens? You have a weight vector, and that weight vector is basically multiplied with that input, and you calculate the W transpose of that input. And basically, this is nothing but like the dot product. You multiply this with this, you multiply this with this, and then you finally sum it up. And after that, you add a nonlinear activation on top of that, and finally you get an output. So this thing is like a single layer of a neural network, and you do it for multiple times, and finally you get like a single output which will define your probability. So how do you train it? Basically, the next question will be how. Okay, it's like this entire step is the forward pass. How do you train it and change the weight? So the next step will be like you already have the two levels. You calculate some sort of error over that, and then you do what we call propagation. So in backpropagation, it's nothing but like you calculate the error, and you have learned in 11 or 12 like how to minimize a given function. So basically, that is what is happening here. So the advantage about this is that the whole approach is very much modular. You can use any type of linear transformation, any type of activation, any type of loss functions, as long as those are like differentiable functions. And sometimes it also works with when you have like non-differentiable functions. And it has been theoretically shown that a neural network can actually approximate any real value function with just a single layer and with a nonlinear activation. And what changed, like people were doing neural networks from the 1950s, but what changed was like the gradient descent algorithm, and that you can actually train any network which is a collection of any number of layers. So now, if you want to apply neural networks for NLP and sequences, if you want to apply neural networks for sequences, what happens is like you basically get like, suppose this is your sentence, and you basically get like the word embeddings for those particular words, and then instead of like what you do is like you pass that to a single point, and then you get an output, and in the next step you concat the input with the output, and you finally get the output of that step. And this is basically represented by a recurrence relation, which is this recurrence relation here. And this whole thing is called the recurrent neural network. And this actually idea looks good in paper, but when you want to implement it, when you want to put it into some real use, this does not work much. There are a lot of difficulties in implementing it. So people actually try a better version of it, which is called the LSTM. And LSTM actually resolves a lot of issues that the recurrent neural network have. Now basically another part of this thing is like the sequence to sequence learning for NLP. So someone is asking about GRU, but I will skip that, and like there is a lot of links in the article on the slide. You can actually go and read about GRU if you are interested about it. So for sequence to sequence learning, it's basically like the translation problem. Suppose you have a sentence which is in English and you want to translate it into Bengali. And then how you do it, basically in this, you basically encode it with an RNN, and then after that you get a final representation of the whole sentence using this, and after that you use another RNN to decode the target sequence, which is in this case the Bengali translation of the English sentence. So people tried that, and it actually broke the translation metrics in all the papers published before that, and it showed a significant improvement over the previous metric. And now this idea is inherently somewhat flawed because you are only representing the whole sequence with just a single vector or just a single parameter. So what people tried that was something called attention. So instead of passing just the whole encoded sequence, you can pass like multiple variants of it, and you basically attain that with respect to what you are decoding, what step you are in that particular step, and then you generate those sequence. So this mechanism is called attention, and it is very highly used in NLP. If you want to read more about attention and sequence to sequence, you can go to the links, those are in the slide. So finally, in NLP, if you want to do some like prove that your algorithm is better than the others, so basically what you do is there are some benchmark tasks which you want to show that it actually improves on that. So I will discuss about few NL tasks that are there in NLP, and then we can some detail. So one of the tasks is like sentiment analysis, and there are like multiple data sets, and this is a very famous example of sentiment analysis when someone tweeted that thank you for sending my baggage to Hyderabad and flying me to Calcutta at the same time. Brilliant service, Indigo. And Indigo's Twitter bot thought that it was actually brilliant service, and then it replied that it's glad to hear that. So you don't want such bad PR to happen. The next thing will be named entity recognition. In named entity recognition, suppose there is a sentence BPPMT is located in Kolkata, is a college under West Bengal University of Technology, and then you want to represent what exactly are, which of those are entities and which of those are what type of entity. So here BPPMT, Kolkata and West Bengal University of Technology are entities. And the next one is textual semantic similarity. Given two sentences, deciding whether those two sentences are like same, or basically they mean the same thing or not. Then the next part will be something called semantic role leveling, which is like given a sentence, you try to extract entity relationships pairs from those sentences. And there are like, I have already noted down the data sets which are popular in those particular tasks. And there is also something called co-reference resolution. So if you see this example, I voted for Nader because he was most aligned with my values, she said. So basically my and she points to this I, and all of them are the same, pointing to the same person, and Nader and he points to the same person. So this linkage is called co-reference resolution. And then finally we have natural language inference, which is given two sentences, whether say that the sentence 1 actually entails, or like sentence 1 and sentence 2 are actually one after another, or the fact of sentence 2 contradicts the fact of sentence 1, or those sentences are not anywhere related. And this is a very popular NLP task, and there are like a lot of data sets in it and a lot of benchmarking data sets in it. And finally is the reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is one of the most like popular tasks if you want to see like how if you want to understand the capability of machine reading language. In reading comprehension, you have a paragraph, you have a question, and you have to automatically answer that question from the knowledge you have from the paragraph. So next we will come like, so these are some of the benchmark data sets on NLP, and what people tried to do before like 2018 was like every one of them had their own state of the art paper and have their own research team working on this. In 2018 people started to come out like, can we actually train a single model? Can we actually train a single model which can do all of the stuffs at once? So people started with like, this was a benchmark paper from Adel NLP. If you know that organization, it's a very good organization for AI research and NLP. And they published this paper called Language Modeling with Elmo. So the cartoon character that you were seeing in the top of the screen is actually that character, which is named Elmo, and the paper is actually named after that current character, cartoon character. So the idea behind all this was like, can you train a single system which can learn a powerful language representation and then perform a specific task? So, there were 2 points. One point was like learning a powerful language representation, and the other thing was like that powerful language representation should be general enough that it can downstream to any other any other specific task. So what they proposed was, they proposed a RNN based network where they will feed us, how they will pre-train that particular network was, they will feed, first they will collect a lot of data from the internet, and then they will feed that RNN, train that RNN to predict the next word of that sentence. So basically, if my input is George House MD often constructed this medical genius, then it should predict like a shifted shifted sentence of this possible input. And then how they train it, so basically they collected 1 billion words benchmark from language modeling, which is a very popular data set by Google. It contains around 1 billion words, and it contains around somewhat like 100 million sentences collected from the internet. And then they basically trained their language model using this. It is not, the language model wasn't like as simple as this. There was a lot of those were like not simple basic RNNs. Those were actually 2 layers LSTMs, and the hidden size of them was somewhat varying. But what Elmo brought in the market was like, it was a single model which was then fine-tuned to some, like what you do like called transfer learning. Then there was fine-tuned to some specific task, and they improved over all the tasks over huge margin. In some cases, the relative improvement was as high as 30-40%. So these are all like the tasks that I discussed previously: NER, SWOT, COREP, SRL, and parsing. And it actually was the first model which showed that you can train a single model and then you can fine tune with the downstream task and improve over it significantly. So this opened box of opportunity for like in the NLP field. And probably I will take some questions if you guys have some questions. Probably someone can say, and we can like take some questions and like discuss about this. We can go to the next step.
I can see one. Vikram, can you take up the questions?
Yes, one question that has been asked, how to maintain a structure, is it necessary? That has been asked by Swagato.
I'm not aware about that. Maybe we can like I'm not sure what she's asking for structure, but the last question is, isn't QLM fit the first and not Elmo? Yes, QLM fit was the first, but like Elmo was like it was very easy to explain, so that's why I chose Elmo, not QLM fit to start it. So we can like go ahead to the next slide then.
Okay, you can.
Yeah. So so I think now from okay. So
Shuprabha, the slides are not visible. Can you please check?
Will it present your slide? I mean, yes.
I am already presenting.
Yeah, now this is coming.
Coming here?
Yes, coming.
So,
Not, I can't see it. I'm sure the participants are not able to see.
Okay.
Oops.
It's visible now.
Yeah, it's visible.
I can't see. It is only Janhavi Datta is coming.
so I think now the slides are visible now, so I can continue with it. So like there's a lot of delay with, and probably the audio and the slides are not in sync, so I'm like getting PPT. So okay, so I will start from here. So basically at this point, LS teams were the king of the like the research space, and then something came like transformers. So there were like few problems with LSTMs. So LSTMs were like auto-regressive. So what do we mean by auto-regressive is like you have to give a input, wait for the output, then you have to give the next input. So there is, when there are auto-regressive models, there are very low scope of actually parallelizing those models, and those models does not scale well when you train for larger amount of models or large amount of data. And also LSTM suffers from something called like longer dependencies. It does not do well with longer dependencies. Longer dependencies in the meaning is like it does not do well when the sentence length is like really long and like it's like 50-60 words. It does not do well. So at this point, something came called the transformers, and there was a benchmark paper like capstone paper or whatever you call it. All attention is all you need. This came from the Google Brain team, and it took like everyone by storm, and it completely changed the NLP scenario for the next couple of years. So what exactly is transformers? So the left thing you see is what we call the transformer model, and it is nothing but like a sequence to sequence model where there is an encoder and there is a decoder, and instead of recurrence relations and all that, those are like all fully connected layers. So if you just simply tell it, it's like there is no recurrent relations among that. And this is how the transformer looks. And it's okay if you don't understand it. So when my professor gave this paper and I read about it, and I was like, what the hell is happening? And there is no way you can understand it in a single time. So I will just explain a very simple thing about this this mechanism, which is called the self-attention. So this paper proposed something called self-attention, and that is one of the most fundamental thing to understand for this transformer model. And another thing was like this model proposed a non-autoregressive way of encoding sequences, and also this model, due to its recurrent structure, it actually have a better convergence than other models. So to give you an insight on how it is important for the self-attention to have, so suppose you have an input sentence which is, I tell like, I arrived at the bank after crossing the river, and then bank can be a bank where you get money, or it can be a bank of a river. So this is one of the main problems that have been troubling the NLP researchers for long. How you differentiate based on the context. So the meaning of bank will be highly dependent on whatever you are talking about in that particular sentence. So they try to solve this using self-attention. So we will look into what exactly is self-attention. So basically, suppose you have a sentence called I love to play cricket, and how you represent that using a transformer network. So first you will get some word embeddings for each word, and then you will basically multiply those, do a dot product of those word embeddings and get a representation of that. Dot product is nothing but like this expression. It's like very simplified in the right part of this thing. And then what you do is like you do a softmax over this. So if I want to simply tell what softmax is, so given this dot product representations, you basically do an exponential of them and then average out them over all the values, all the possible values, and then you get values which are nothing but probability distributions type of thing, such that all these things adds up to 1. So now these things are called attention weights. So basically the intuition behind all this is that this will represent how what I should be represented dependent on the content, on the context of this whole sequence. Then we do like a weighted summation of that, and then we finally get a representation of the word I, and then we do it for all the words. And the best thing about this is that it can actually be highly parallelized, and because all the steps are independent of each other. So to break down the transformer architecture, this is the core concept of the transformer network. And after that, instead of having this, you have like h number of attention, self-attention networks, and you call them each an attention heads. And then after that, you get these modules, and then you basically repeat this after like any number of steps, and do it like transformer networks are generally like 8 to 10 layers. Yeah, so basically that's the idea behind this. You can easily implement the dot product using matrix multiplication. So that's why it is very much faster than the previous recurrent ones, because when you can implement this as a matrix multiplication, you can actually do it in a parallelized manner. So now at this moment, so we had attention, we had this transformer paper, and the NLP community was like really how to do it as batches. So yeah, basically you can do it as, okay, I can tell you like after that. Okay, I will just take those questions a bit later, because otherwise we will get detached, but I will take this question a bit later. Okay. So the next thing that came in the NLP world, and probably if you have slightly worked with NLP in the last couple of years, or like if you have read about articles, you know this BERT thing, and you have probably come across BERT at any point. So we'll learn about what exactly is this BERT. So basically, BERT is nothing like, it proposes a similar methodology like LMO. And the first step is like, you first do a unsupervised pre-training on a very large text corpus, and then after that, if you get that model, you can take that model and take the weights and apply it for your specific task, which can be like sentiment analysis, which can be question answering, which can be constituency parsing, or anything like that. So you can easily do that, and that basically opens up a huge lot of opportunity for small scale NLP practitioners. So we will see how BERT is trained. So BERT have two pre-training objectives, and one of them is like, the first one is the mask language modeling. So in mask language modeling, you have an input. Suppose the input is like deep learning solved language by dash mask machine. So what you do is like, you first randomly mask some words. So if you see here, these two words are randomly masked from the input. And then you also add some location, some feature which actually indicates what location that word is coming in the sentence. And then you pass it through BERT and try to pass it through this like 12 layers transformer with 768 hidden set. And then you try to predict those words which were actually masked in the input. And this is how you train it. And it is actually trained on a really huge corpus and takes a whole lot of time. We'll come into that part later. But Mask language modeling is one of the training strategy, and the next training strategy is next sentence prediction. So in next sentence prediction, basically you pass two sentences as input to the transformer model. Suppose it's like I love cricket, and the second sentence is like Virat is my favorite, and you try to predict whether those two sentences are actually is part sentence B, it's part B sentence next of part A sentence, and then you try to classify on that. So doing that, it actually makes the transformer understand context, sequentiality, and a lot of long-term dependencies are much better. And you can easily train on those because you don't need any parallel corpus. The whole internet is basically can be used for training. So there are a lot of questions coming. Okay, I think I will take it like in the next question break, and probably will answer a few of them. And so these are the two main steps that we are using for like pre-training. And once the pre-training is done, you can actually take this model and apply to your specific task without doing much, and it actually performs really well on it. So once the pre-training is done, you can take the weights and then it apply to your specific particular task. What you need to do is you need to only add couple of layers on top of that, and as there like you need to only add like 1-2 layers, there will be like 2,000-3,000 parameters that you need to learn. So you can very easily learn. So if you have a data set which is like of 1,000 sentences, then you can very easily learn on that because there are very small, you already have learned a powerful language representation on the base model itself. So they have trained it around with 3.3 billion words, and what BERT did was like BERT set another benchmark on this, and it almost like break all the records in all the tasks that we actually track for NLP progress, and it improved over like improved over a lot. So we basically give BERT a big credit, but there is one particular group which is a lot like not credited that much for this thing. That was like the OpenAI group which built the GPT. So the BERT and OpenAI group GPT, the GPT did not show that much improvement compared to BERT, and the GPT basically had a few things lagging which BERT then added and got like a huge improvement, like in some cases like 10%, 12% absolute improvement on multiple tasks. So now we are like in the next part and we will take few questions. So I think there are a lot of questions here. I will try to take few questions from here directly. Just overcome challenges in detecting neighboring arguments. So for like sentiment analysis, there is actually dedicated teams that work on sarcasm detection, and that example I gave was like more of like a sarcasm, and there are teams dedicated working who work on sarcasm detection, and it's like a very tough problem to detect whether that sentence is actually a sarcasm or like like a truth type of sentence. It's just fixing same words. So I will skip that question from Sagoto, like Minimax solution to the dot product thing. I will tell you later, and you can sync with me offline about that, and I can show you that. Does fixing the same words to same attention places always work? If not, how is this managed? Okay, so basically you don't have like same weights for all attention. All the attention aids have like different type of attentions. All the attention weights have like different parameters. So basically all of them will learn a different thing about attending. What is the best way according to you to the limitation posed by sequence self-identical models like what? So in cases where documents are long. So basically what people do with BERT in cases of like when the documents is really wrong, so basically they will pick a segment which is like the max sequence length of BERT, and then they pass it through BERT, and then they pick the next overlapping segment of that sentence, of that document, and then pass it, and then finally do some averaging on top of that. And there is a lot of things, even in squad, also in the paper also they said that they did a similar type of thing. Is masking better than dropout? So in transformer, in the sense of transformer, masking is very different. So in masking, what it says is like in masking, what it says like you give a particular mask, and that attention will be provided if the mask value is 0 to those particular inputs, and the attention will be provided to those values which have 1. In dropout, dropout is like a bit different idea than that, and it more acts like a regularizer than like masking. Masking is like something which is fixed and which is not learned, and dropout is also something which is not learned. But those two serve a different purpose. So I will go to the next part now. So yeah. So basically, we have come to a point in NLP where we actually can see that the machine is performing much better than human. So these are two benchmark tasks, in NLP which are tracked. And as you can see, like in the blue benchmark, human is right now at 13, and there are like 12 better models than that. And for sport, the case is like the human race is like more backward in that, and it's so in late in the leaderboard that they even stopped like giving rank to the human performance. And if you guess slightly, it stands around 2021. And Squad 2.0 was designed to be tougher than Squad 2.0, Squad 1.1. So it was broken in like 3-4 months. Some papers got to broke the human performance level on this thing. So like these two specific tasks, groups not a specific task. It's a collection of multiple tasks. While sports get the question answering task, and humans, both of them, human performance have been given by machines while people are watching. So the next part is like models with billion parameters. So if you see, like this is where Elmo started around 2018, and this is where GPT started. Now, like the best model is like the largest model was released in January this year, and that model have like around 17 billion parameters. So you can't imagine what exactly 17 billion parameters. I can also imagine like what exactly is 17 billion parameter. So yeah. So by looking at those tables, you might feel that actually language is what else is remaining in this field. So language is solved. That means, but yeah, not exactly that way. So something works in the research when you tried with simple question which was not part of the domain. It actually gives you very poor results. So if you want to focus on why language is still not solved, there are a few points. Language is not just English. So whatever these models have proposed, they have proposed for English. They does not work or scale pretty well with other languages other than English. And language is much more than just text. So NLP works mostly in text. There are other dimension of languages, which is conversation, like speech, and those are still yet machines are yet not yet there. And it's very compute expensive. So if you go through some blogs and look at the time that it was taken for models to train BERT and these large scale models, that will actually blow your mind. And it's like if you try to train it with like normal, even of the most powerful GPU that is available right now in the market, it will take in a single GPU, it will take around like 4 or 5 years to train that particular model. So still that means it's totally bound by hardware requirements. And it's not robust enough for all domains. So basically whatever works in Wikipedia domain, if the training data is from Wikipedia domain, it will not work with when you pass a tweet to that, and it will perform very quick. And one of the main focus that was recently discovered was that these NLP models are much more gender biased and racial biased among these models, and they particularly have this bias from the text that is trained with. And there is an active area of research where people try to remove those gender bias from those models. And also the final point will be explainability. Even if these numbers go over the roof, there is no explainability in this. You can't like really explain what is happening inside like 18 attention heads. So the next part will be focusing on more like how can we scale around languages, and the next, and also why, how it is compute expensive, and how people like you, me can start on this field and not just big corporations. So this part will be about NLP for low resource languages. So there are a couple of approaches in this part. So basically one part is multitask learning, which is like you don't learn for a single task, you learn for like two tasks at once, and then you train your model on that. So if suppose a particular task have a larger data set compared to task A have a larger data set compared to task B, you can train on both of them, and hopefully task B will benefit task A. And there has been a lot of paper in this area which have shown that it actually benefits in most of the cases to train it in a multitask fashion. And then there is few shot learning. Few shot learning is nothing but like suppose you only have like 4 images of a dog. So if you go give a baby like 4 images of a dog and then give another 5th image and try to ask them like which species they are and which image it is more close to, human will probably understand, and human will have a better understanding of that. So currently there is an active area of research. If like there is like only 5 images, how can you identify that? So this depends on this few-shot learning field, depends on highly superior representation of the input data that you are having, and we will look into few use cases of case studies of that few-shot learning. And also another important area is like cross-lingual learning. So basically, if you have large data for like English, how Bengali or Hindi, which don't have that much amount of large data, can benefit from English, and vice versa. And also the last part will be unsupervised learning, where for a specific task, you don't have like a really big data, but still you want to like, is there an unsupervised way where you can actually train for it and then like do some real task specific fine tuning with very small amount of data and get that similar amount of performance. So we'll be looking into some case studies of that, and we will see like how for each of the case studies, how actually the current state is. So for few short learning, we have taken an example for prototypical network. So I have misspelled that in the slide. Forgive me for that. And so basically the idea of prototypical network is nothing. So suppose you want to do like some classification, and you have a data like this. Each color represents a particular class. Then you pick like 3 random classes from that, 3 random samples from each class from that, from the input, and then you call it as your support set. And then after that, you suppose pass it to our BERT model, considering that our input data is coming from a text domain, and you pass it through BERT, and then you get like some representation of each of those input items. And then finally you have a query set. In query set, you pick another random sample from the input set, and which actually have which actually have the class in the support set, and you call this thing a query set. And then you also pass it through the model and get a representation of that. And then after that, you do the same dot product kind of thing, and you will get something like this. And here it is not like a simple dot product. Here it is like something it will pass through a network, and it will have some weights to learn some transformation among them. And then you calculate a softmax among that, and you know finally in this input which part of your support set the data is. So you can easily do another set of backpropagation, and then you can train the whole network from here. So what exactly happens with this? The network actually learns much better representation, and it actually learns to distinguish multiple objects, like multiple type of classes in a much better way. So this is like a basic use case of few-shot learning, and you can look up into like there is actually I have given links for a meta learning survey where there is a lot of articles about this. So the other part is like unsupervised translation. This is basically a use case of unsupervised learning. In unsupervised translation, what you do is like you don't have any parallel data in translation, and then you try to do like map from language 1 to language 2. So suppose if I give you an example like today's weather is very nice and someone wants to translate that to Bengali, আজকের weather খুব সুন্দর, আজকের আবহাওয়া খুব সুন্দর. And then what you do is like if you have a large amount of data of these kind of pairs in English and Bengali, what you will do is you will train a sequence to sequence model on this, and you can hope that it will come around the good accuracy or something. You will get some good numbers. But English and Bengali don't have that much amount of data. So what you should do in that case? In that case, there was a simple method that was proposed by a group from Facebook research, and what they suggested was like, suppose you have a lot of English data, you have a lot of Bengali data, you can collect it from any source in the internet. What you do is like you train encoder and decoder architecture, and then you try to generate the same sentence from this, encode the same sentence and decode the same sentence out of that, and you do it for the same way for Bengali also. You have a Bengali specific encoder and a Bengali specific decoder, and do a sequence to sequence model for that. And if you see, there is actually a pattern emerging. What if you can connect this thing to this? What if you can connect the English decoder to the Bangla, English encoder to the Bangla decoder? Then you can actually translate English to Bengali. So what they suggested was this won't be possible because it will have learned very different representation. So what they suggested was sharing some amount of layers between among the English and Bengali model. So I'm sorry if this audio is like cutting. So I will try to like go a bit slow and then see. It will have a shared some sort of sharing between those two models. And once the sharing is there, you can easily connect those two and you can get like some decent amount of translation with that. So what this showed was like without not a single parallel sentence like this in English and Bengali, they did it for English and German. I think it's a different use case, but still they got some numbers which was like around a decent number. But there was another interesting thing that happened. When they added some amount of parallel corpus with it, that number actually reached the numbers that were actually we were getting using the whole data set, which was around 1 million. So basically they showed that if you do some sort of unsupervised learning in the first step and do fine tuning, you can actually reach the level of accuracy that you will get with like 1 million data points using just 100,000 parallel data. Yeah, so basically one question was like, do NLP and computer vision use similar deep learning techniques to solve most problems? Basically whatever happened to image 5-6 years back, people take a lot of motivation from that, and a lot of concepts that actually have come from actually computer vision from NLP. And one of them was like, this idea of sequence to sequence model was also somewhat coming from there. And finally, after a few iterations, we showed that, okay, with this technique, with very small amount of data, you can actually outperform the best techniques that only use parallel corpus and only use like the best models of that kind by like some margin. So yeah, this is actually very much helpful, and you can actually easily train a translation model if you have a very small amount of data. So then next came like the cross-lingual language representation. BERT actually works pretty well for English, but it does not work much well for other languages. So what we do is like here in BERT, if we instead of feeding just English sentences, what if we start feeding like sentences from all languages? And then suppose this is like, and then it was proposed as multilingual BERT. Then these multilingual BERT actually does not perform much well. So after this, there was another architecture that was proposed, which was called the XLM, which was called Translation Language Modeling. So what they did was they take the same BERT model and then they pass it like, they concatenated two sentences from two different languages, but which meant the same thing. And then they do the same sort of masking in the input. And in the input, they mask a word from a particular language, and then they try to predict that particular word on the output. So what they show is like with this thing, you can actually learn a much better cross-lingual representation, and then you can learn a much better cross-lingual representation. And what you can do is like if you have a model like this, and suppose someone you are interested in doing like sentiment analysis in Bengali, so you can take a single text, and there are like sentiment analysis datasets in Bengali which have like 100, 200 samples, where you can actually label those 100, 200 samples, and take this model which is already trained on like 100, 200 sentences, and then just add a single layer on top of that and do the classification, train it on just sentiment analysis. So what happens, like as this base model already have a lot of representation about Bengali and multiple other languages, you actually don't need to need a lot of data for training it on Bengali sentiment analysis. Right? And you can easily do it for, you can easily scale it for more languages. So these models are typically available in 4 languages, and there is a link. There is a link. You actually download this. So if this part so I will skip that and I will go to the last part. So the challenges of training. So like you probably will be thinking like these are cool, but this will require like GPUs which cost in lakhs. So if I give you some estimate about like till when I used to do my MTech, when I was doing my MTech, our lab had this sort of GPUs, and this cost around like 90,000 rupees for a 11 GB GPU, and this can only take like only 3 to 6 input samples in a single batch. And these are like more production-wise GPUs which are used by large corporations, like typically NVIDIA V100 GPUs, which costs in the lakhs. So the entry barrier is very high in this particular field. So, but not right now, like during architecture GPUs, which are like if you are in group like you know the architecture is graphics card, you can add about only and do like a huge award for those industry practitioners and like those who are doing research on it. Typically they cost a lot less, around 40 to 50,000 rupees. They cost 8 of and these GPUs is like that it has supports and it supports floating point 16-bit computation. So in the standard models actually have 32-bit computation, and these can support that effective it is like at the 16 GB it can double any computation and also don't have like and I would like to have this if you use you go to Google Colab, Google offers some sort of GPUs, and Azure also offers some GPUs, but Google for Colab will take a GPU for some you can easily do some practice and backup and do things. Or like in you should the audio. Okay. Okay, so I'm like almost done in this part. So this is like the last slide. So now these models are like of parameters 150 million. So 150 parameters, and what happens is like typically these models are typically very slow when you want to do inferencing on that or run it on a server. So what happens? There were some few strategies which was proposed. Uh, okay. So there were few strategies which were proposed, and some of them considers like changing the architecture. Some of them actually do like compressing the model after the model weights. So if your model is trained on floating point 32, you try to convert those to floating point 16, and it actually saves like half of the space, and it actually speeds up in a 2x manner. And there is also something called pruning. So you train a network and then you randomly drop out paths from that network. This is not exactly same as dropout because you do it after training and then you have a validation set, and then you will actually drop them out, and like you try to get a bit smaller network, and this strategy is called pruning. And there are a lot of tools that actually do it on like Colab GPU does not support probably FP8. Probably P100 is the only GPU that supports FP8, but it supports like FP16 Colab GPU support. So there are a lot of frameworks that actually give the code that to this framework, and they will highly optimize your code, highly optimize your model so that it can even learn on GPU. So another is interesting approach is like knowledge distillation. In knowledge distillation, what happens like typically you have a very large network, and you want to train a small network from that network. So what happens is like you have a completely, so that will answer the question of like what will be a good data augmentation strategy for NLP. So once you have a large network, you can feed it unlabeled data set on the internet, and then you can ask it to like label that data set for you. So it will label it as a probability distribution, and then you pick a very small network, which is like typically if your teacher network. So the yellow network is called the teacher network, and the blue network is called the student network. So if your teacher network is almost around like 24 layers, 1000 hidden side, you pick a very small network which is like 4 layers, 256 hidden side, and then you train that small layer with the labels that you have generated from the large layer. And this thing actually works amazingly well and actually is applied to most of the things that you use. Even if you are using translation, if you are using like any speech services, those models are trained through distillation because the big models can't be deployed in production because they will have a really huge throughput. And this was a paper which showed like how to distill word and reduce the parameter size effectively by 30% to its 30%. And I have also linked a few. Like articles where you can go and find about this. And yeah, that's more or less the end of the talk. So I think there was a lot of issues because of like probably about the syncing. So, sir, anything? Why are any questions like put it in the chat? What was the reason like your mind? You can ask me there directly.
Vikram, can you take up some questions? I think he has taken up a lot of questions so far.
Yes.
Anything
already,
else?
most of the-
Uh-huh.
So I have a question, Abhijit. So can you put some light on use of GAN in this case for low resource languages?
Yes, so basically people try GAN for NLP a lot, and you can like mute your mic, otherwise they will not hear people. So people actually tried GAN for NLP for a long time, but GAN does not work because there is a fundamental problem with GAN is like GAN does not work when the variable that you are trying to generate is discrete. So it does work with images because some way images, even if images are continuous, images are discrete, it is more in the continuous uh, uh, side. But for text, you have to predict like text generation does not work much well with GAN, but there are applications of GAN that actually happen, and in those applications are mostly limited towards like adversarial learning situations. And so, if I want to give you an example of adversarial learning situation, that will be something like suppose you want to generate text. Suppose you want to generate text, and you want to have like you don't want that particular feature to be more dominant in the output. So you can do some adversarial learning on that particular feature and then add it as a loss to that network. So in those cases it works, but like if you want to know about text generation, CAN does not work that well. But there are like other methods which are like if you see OpenGPT and GPT-2, XLNet, those are work really well for like text generation scenarios. And probably text generation is more like a local problem right now.
There is a question from Anshuman Swarup Das. He says that, sir, could you please tell how the sentiment analysis can overcome challenges such as detecting negative responses, irony, and sarcasm while implementing NLP with ML?
Yep. For sentiment analysis, there's actually a field for this sarcasm detection. So there are teams who work on sarcasm detection, and even there was a team at the lab that I worked in, IIT Bombay, Secret, and there's also a team in IIT Patna that works on sarcasm detection. So sarcasm detection is like a very challenging problem, and it have a lot of real life applications on it. So
Okay.
yeah, so still sarcasm detection is like a hard problem, and it's not like you can say it's like really solved in that sense.
There is another question from Shagata Chatterjee. He says that, is there a robust transfer learning approach for NLP yet? Like for both wiki entries and tweets?
Yes, so like if you work with BERT, and there are some new variants of BERT which are like not BERT but like new like XLNet and all those. Those are trained from data from various domains, so that actually works like it actually can transfer. You can do easily transfer learning on that from multiple domains, but still, this is like very challenging for NLP right now, and like it is also kind of similar for images also, but it's like still a very much open problem that if you want to give just any data from any domain, will it work? Probably not, but it will work from like if you do some, if you're clever enough, it will work to some extent.
Okay, Arunava Dey, he asks that, can transliteration be a good problem area for cross-lingual learning?
Yes, like there is a lot of thing happening in transliteration, and a lot of them actually use cross-lingual learning. Yes.
Then Anshuman Swarup Das, he again asks, sir, do NLP and computer vision use similar deep learning techniques to solve most problems?
Yes, so it's more like the inherent architectures of these things are more like multiplication and differentiation and just adding. So building blocks for NLP and vision are like same, but you will have different type of things. Like you in the computer vision, you will have coordinates. Here you will have like transformers, recurrent and things like that. But the building blocks for all of them are like same.
Okay, so Orijit, can you share the slides later so that we can pass it on to our participants?
Yes, sure. I can.
Okay, because I think there are a lot of very important, very informative links which they can explore. So that will be of great help. Okay.
Yes, sure. I will,
Yeah.
I will place the slides right now in the chat. That is
Okay. Okay. I think there are more questions. They can be taken offline. You have shared your email, and I would the coordinator of this session, Shuprabha, to conclude with a vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Special thanks to Mr. Arijit Mukherjee, our student. He was a pass-out student of 2016 batch. Thank you, Arijit, for your very nice presentation. and thank you to all the team members for organizing this webinar in a short notice. I mean, our HOD madam is present here, Vikram sir is present here. Thanks to principal ma'am and thanks to Professor B.N. Chatterjee sir, who has supported all the way to conduct this webinar successfully. And thanks to the participant for listening this nice lecture. I think you will get lots of insight out of it, and you'll get your